Well, it's a pleasure to share a podium with Rob. I met Rob in Paris in 2002 at a conference honoring the heritage of Thomas Jefferson. And we had barbecue for lunch today, and I was reminded of a comment by the noted Kansas City composer Virgil Thompson, who went to live in Paris in the 1920s, and I heard him say one time that he always liked Paris because it reminded him of Kansas City. He said it has good food, religion, and vice. No one else thought it was funny, but I thought it was hilarious. Interesting question. What happened? How did we start with Jefferson and Madison and these people and end up in our present condition? I'm always reminded of the observation of Poincaré, who was a French politician. He said, "America is the only society to go from barbarism to decadence without civilization in between." I always wanted to assign that on a final exam somewhere, but I never did get the chance. Well, the part of this that I want to talk about actually sort of arises from my experiences in Paris 8 years ago. This is the issue of what was the impact of what we started out to do on the rest of the world, and how did this relate to other countries and other peoples. Obviously, this is a very big topic, and I'm just going to go through a few sort of highlights of it. But it really was a quite striking historical development. All the European countries had established churches, established by the government, usually a monarchy, and so forth. So here was this republic, as we actually are defined to be in the Constitution, which stood forth before the entire world as an example, as a hopeful example. Well, I want to talk just a moment about the Native Americans and their experience of all this. There's a very wonderful book by a guy named Jack Weatherford called Indian Givers. This book is probably available right here in the library. But Weatherford is a professor of anthropology up in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And this book came out in the 1980s, and he has two chapters on one is on the views and sometimes personal visits of Native Americans to Europe in the 18th century and 17th century. And people were always very impressed by the emphasis that most Native Americans had on personal liberty. Now, obviously, in terms of separation of church and state, since the Native American tribes didn't have a state, there couldn't be any separation. And obviously, their religious beliefs were often fused with whatever kind of governance that they had on a tribal basis. But it's notably so that they were very respectful of each other's religious beliefs. Now, surely there were wars between tribes and even slavery, but the whole idea of going down and burning down someone else's tribe and so forth, their village, and destroying all the religious things there was something that only happened in Europe, not in Native America. Furthermore, French writers, or European writers such as Michel Montaigne, noted that the natives in America were governed by natural laws and very little corrupted by our own. So many of them were very impressed by the dignity and the kind of philosophical character of Native American people. He has another chapter in this book on the native founding fathers. And this is, I should say, rather disputed by historians. But Weatherford argues that many of the things that we see in the Constitution were at least influenced by the practices of Native American tribes. The fact that there were regular councils in which everybody could participate. Of course, they varied from tribe to tribe, but they were participatory. Furthermore, chiefs could lose their position. Chiefs did not have their position for life. If they turned out to be lousy chiefs, they could be deposed. And the suggestion is that this is reflected in our process of impeachment and trial in the Constitution. Fascinating detail he reports concerning the League of the Iroquois, which is a very important league in 18th century America, that the role of the women was critical. If the chief misbehaved or was found incompetent, it was a vote of the women who deposed the chief and elected a new chief. And you can sit back and sort of beguile yourself what would happen if that happened in America today. It'd probably be all to the good. Furthermore, the Iroquois could add new tribes. And so Weatherford says, look, the League could expand, not through colonization, but through admission on an equal basis. So the whole process of adding new territories and new states may have been influenced by that. That's a complicated subject, but I would direct your attention to Weatherford's book for a really fascinating discussion. I should say also that the subsequent history into the 19th century was pretty appalling, and even in the 20th century, because as everybody knows, children of many tribes were forcibly taken from their families, sent to distant religious schools, forbidden to speak their language, forbidden their native dress, and forbidden their religious practices. So here we have freedom of religion, if you like, but it was very notably not the case for young Native American children for many decades. Rob alluded to the early 19th century. There's a lot of scholarship talking about the whole move to Christianize America, which he alluded to in terms of amendments and so forth, Sunday Mail and all that. One of these books is called Awash in a Sea of Faith. And the revivals that started in Cane Ridge, Kentucky in the early 19th century and spread throughout the entire South particularly, were, I think, a direct reaction to the rise of deism. And they wanted to Christianize. If they couldn't Christianize the government, they could Christianize the people. And so this happened, I think, on a very large scale. The idea that Washington was talking about the supreme architect of the universe, it comes straight out of Freemasonry, and George Washington was a Freemason. Freemasonry, which I can't get into very much here, was an international movement. It was in France, it was in Britain, Germany, and of course the United States. Benjamin Franklin was a Freemason. Washington, Jefferson was not. It was kind of a mixture on that score, but by the 1820s in this country, the first third party that appeared was the anti-Masonic Party. And they were particularly active in the Northeast, New York State, Pennsylvania. And it didn't last very long, but it was fed by the equivalent of our current day Christian right to try to undermine and in fact almost destroy the deist presence in America, which took the form of the Masonic lodges. And again, there's a lot of interesting scholarship about that.